All right. Hello, everyone. I don't know if there's anyone here yet. Let me put a little hello message in the chat. Welcome to Intro to FM Synthesis. Oops, what just happened? Hey, how's it going? Rabbite. You're new. I don't think you've joined one of our streams before. Appreciate the audience. I'm just typing a real quick welcome message. Welcome to the stream. Ask any questions you have, and we'll get started. And yeah, if you do have questions, you can just type them into the chat, and you don't have to wait. Oh, you were on your real name. Oh, well, then welcome to the stream under a different alias. I'm happy to have you here, whatever you're calling yourself. It's all good. Certainly don't require people to have consistency of online names or anything like that. So it's all good, brother or sister. Oh, and now my dog wants in, and then we'll get started for real. Come on, pup. You too, Biddy? Come on. You coming in, old man? No? Okay, you stay up there. Okay. Welcome. Looks like a pretty good turnout. So if you hadn't seen it, I actually posted today on the website the article, long-awaited article, Intro to FM Synthesis, or FM Synthesis Basic 1, FM Basics 1, I think is what it's called, in the How to Synth series. That's what I'm holding here as a printout. I'm actually going to be going through this lesson, more or less step by step. I'm not going to just read the whole thing, but I'll kind of go over the same points, show you all the parts of the synth that we're using, and just kind of go and go from there. Answer questions, go through the exercises, show you some of the sounds that I've made, kind of preparatory. That's it. Okay, so this is the opsix plugin. We chatted about Ableton once, Rabbi. Okay, cool. I did some Ableton streams a while back. It's been a minute, but I would probably do some more in the future, including possibly on Operator, which is the FM synth built into Ableton. I could have done all these lessons on that, certainly, but I like this synth plugin, and it's a little more visually, both visually pleasing and maybe a little easier to see what's going on with some of the things, which is why I chose this. But if people are into it, I would definitely do another stream or just a video on Operator specifically. I actually have done a couple on Operator, so you can do that. They're just not quite as focused on this as on FM Basics. Okay, so this is the opsix native plugin. Let me see if there's like an initialized patch that I can pull up. I mean, I know I can just initialize the patch, but it'll have my name on there. I guess that doesn't really matter, does it? Okay, I'm just going to initialize this patch. I'm going to go up here to initialize. Ignore the name up here. That's just the name of it's. We'll get to that later. But so this is an initialized patch. Let me put my headphones on so I can actually hear the synthesizer. Hey, Swarm, how's it going? So what we're hearing, just a sine wave, right? So one of the reasons that I picked this synthesizer instead of Operator or a different synthesizer, DexEd, for example, is free. It's basically a DX7 in software. But I really like this synthesizer because the interface particularly in hardware, but also in this software version, is super intuitive and makes more sense and is easier to explain to people than anything else. So if you look at the screen here, the first thing I'd like to draw your attention to is that you have two different colors of operators. These are the operators. There's 6 of them. Opsix, 6 operators, right? And some of them are this pink color, and some of them are this purple-blue color. And the ones that are pink are the ones that you hear. Those are the carriers. And the ones that are purple or blue, depending on how your eyes register colors, are the ones that are modulating the ones that you hear. So they're the modulators. So you have carriers and modulators. You can only ever hear carriers. I believe it would be possible to do a synth that also output the modulators. I don't know that there's a design that actually does that, but I think it's possible. So these the blue ones are the modulators, the red ones are the carriers, or pink, blue, whatever, pink, purple, whatever you want to call these colors. I'll probably refer to them inconsistently throughout, and so you'll just hopefully understand what I'm talking about. But pink, purple, red, blue, pink, blue, whatever you want to call them. Okay, so if you look at the I'm gesturing towards the screen. I realize you can't see that when we move the mouse. If you look at the this section here, you can see the red, pink one is what you're hearing. This one's, the volume's turned all the way down, so you would theoretically hear it, but you're not hearing it now. And then these are all modulators, and then as you switch through the algorithms, that changes which ones are. So on this one, for example, you've got 3 carriers and 3 modulators. It's just split up into 3 pairs. I'm actually going to leave this on this algorithm for now. Actually, we're going to switch to this algorithm, actually, too. And we're going to ignore this right-hand side, this side here, the stack of 4 operators on the side, and we're just going to be dealing with this entire lesson with 2 operators at a time. Because I want to keep this simple, and for one thing, and because you can actually do a tremendous amount with it. And the key to understanding multiple operators is understanding what's happening with 2 operators. They're complex enough that it just makes sense to stick with those. Okay, so the theory-wise, FM works by it's basically audio speed vibrato. Vibrato changes the pitch up and down, woo, 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 right? If you've done any sort of synthesis at all, or played a real instrument, you're familiar with vibrato. If you speed up that vibrato, normal vibrato happens at about 5 hertz, so 5 oscillations a second. But if you speed it up to audio rate, which starts at 20 hertz and goes up to 20 kilohertz, so anywhere in that range, you get sidebands created. And sidebands just means new frequencies within the so you start off with a sine wave, which is just the fundamental. It's one single pitch. There's no harmonics or overtones. Just the pure sine wave, because all sounds are just combinations of sine waves, of course. Hopefully you understand that, at least or can take my word for it. But when you modulate the sine wave, you get additional frequencies and thus get more complex waveforms. It's actually fairly simple with FM to come up with some traditional wave shapes like sawtooth and square waves, and we'll do that as part of these exercises. But it's also, you don't really have to do that because we work with sawtooth and square waves in subtractive synthesis because they're easy to create and they have a lot of harmonics. But here it's easy to create a wider variety of complex waves with plenty of harmonics, so we don't have to limit ourselves to basic wave shapes. All right, so the main unit of FM synthesis is the operator. So just look at this operator here. An operator is basically a combination of a oscillator, an amplifier stage, and an envelope to control the amplifier stage. Now it's implemented digitally, so it doesn't actually have like all these separate parts. But if you were going to build an FM synth and analog, that's the parts you would need for each operator. You'd need an amplifier, an envelope, and a oscillator, a sine wave capable oscillator. It can produce anything. even though sine waves are what's traditionally used, you can literally use any waveform. Like this synthesizer allows you to select from a bunch of different waveforms. We're not going to get into that today, but I'm just showing you that it's possible. Traditionally it's all sine waves. Later synths added this capability to do this. But yeah, it's just a sine wave oscillator with an FM input, a frequency modulation input, and that allows it to be modulated by this other oscillator. So you just put your vibrato in there into the operator, and at audio speed, new band's created. It's a beautiful thing. So the envelope that we're talking about is here. So the 2 pages will be, or 3 pages we'll be working with are this mode page, the pitch page, and the envelope. Okay, and we're not going to mess with the pitch mod or key tracking or filters, any of that stuff today, because this is complex enough. We're just going to get through how to work with 2 operators simultaneously. Yeah. So the amp stage, there's no place to control that other than this envelope. This controls the amplitude over time of your, and this is just a standard ADSR envelope. The DX7 had time level envelopes, and I think they were 5-stage. Were they 5-stage? So it technically allows for slightly more complex envelopes than this, but it's rare that you will need more than an ADSR anyway. It certainly gives you enough flexibility for 97% of your use cases. So yeah, that controls the amplitude. Pitch is controlled here, this knob here, and we can get to that now. So pitch is expressed as a ratio. 1-to-1 means you play the note of the key. It's 2-to-1 is an octave higher. It's twice as high, right? That's how octaves work. 3-to-1 is an octave and a fifth higher. 4-to-1 is 2 octaves higher, et cetera, right? 0.5 is an octave lower, so which you can also achieve by, like, for example, transposing this down 12 steps will also give you an octave lower. Generally speaking, there are certainly exceptions, but generally speaking, your carrier is going to live at all operators are clocked. What do you mean that they're on the they're phase locked? Is that what you mean? You can actually unsync them if you want. If that's not what you mean by clocked, let me know what you mean and I'll answer that question more properly. But yeah, you can phase lock them in this synthesizer, or let them run free, or even set them to random, and that will give you slightly different effects based on what you have selected here. I have it set to sync. That's what the old DX7 did. And the so ratios, right? So pitch, so ratio. Typically, you would have your carrier ratios is generally set to 1. There are exceptions, generally set to 1, and the modulator ratios is where you get different frequencies. Excuse me. So a ratio of 1-to-1. So this is 1 and this is 1. It describes the relationship of these 2 oscillators, right? And also the relationship of. So you can think of the ratio is between any 2 operators, but you can also think of it in terms of in relation to your concert pitch. So this is playing an octave higher than this, octave and a fifth, 2 octaves, et cetera. And then the other thing, there's this fine control, and this will be different. There's a lot of different FM synths out there, and they do things differently. Some, for example, would not have a coarse and fine. They would just have a single control that you turn, that in between 1 and 2, you'd have, however many steps of resolution that allowed you to have dozens, hundreds, if there's 3 decimal points of 1,000 points of resolution. And this one works actually on a little different basis. It allows you to pick a fine tuning, and then it multiplies it by the ratio. So right now it's 1.0. For example, I set this 1.08. and it's 1.08 because this is set to 1, right? So 1 times 1.08 equals 1.08. But if I go to 2, now it's 2.16. So if I wanted 2.14, I have to go down here and modulate it. So you have to do a little simple math in order, the way this works, in order to get your fractional, your non-integer tunings on this. And the other thing you can do with them, so there's whole number tunings, whole number ratios, simple ratios. Those will typically provide harmonics is what they'll provide. It's just to say the overtones created will be in the harmonic series and they will sound pleasing to your ears. So in modular, right. So phase lock, I mean, in modular, I guess you could clock, there's lots of different reasons you could clock a oscillator, I guess. But yes, I think that what you're talking about is them being phase locked. So essentially, yes, they are all clocked if you want them to be. Okay, anyway, getting back to this. Whole number ratios, integer ratios, 5 to 1, 8 to 1, 4 to 1, 2 to 1, 3 to 2 would also be like a pretty simple. That's it gives you a fifth up. Any simple ratio gives you a harmonic sound. Non-integral ratios give you more metallic and noisy, unusual overtones. And fixed, that's the last thing you can do, is just set it to a fixed tuning. And that'll give you some really wild sounds. That's typically used for sound effects and percussion. So we got ratio, operator. Now levels. So you're going to control your levels here. There's this level control here. The hardware version of this has a really nice setup where you've got 6 sliders and 6 knobs for the ratios and the levels, right, all in one place. And so you can just really dial things in from that. Here, you have to switch around just a little bit to get to these things, but this screen is this pitch screen is a pretty good place to do most of your work because it gives you the level and ratio right here, and then you just have to switch over to the envelope tab. And if you need feedback, then you either have to go here or another place. We'll talk to that in a second, but let's just keep going through this. So the level of your carrier is just literally going to be how loud the sound is. For all these exercises, we're going to do this at 100%. When you start mixing in more operators, then you might want to vary the level of your carrier. But as long as you're just using a single operator pair, then you just want your carrier to be full volume as modulated by your envelope, obviously. So, this one would go to full volume, slowly decay to 50% volume, and then when you release it, it releases over 100 milliseconds. This is the same envelope, I think. Yeah, it's set all the way to 90. I must have been screwing around with that. Okay, anyway, it's set to 60. But yeah, and then the level of your modulator is the level of your modulation, obviously, and this will affect how complex your timbre is. So if you're coming from the subtractive world, and I assume most people, that's where most of their experience is, then what you are used to is, this is essentially the same as a filter, is what it is. So over here, the filter is the most open, so you get the most harmonics. And over here, the filter is completely closed, and so you just get a sine wave harmonic. And then the last thing is feedback, and then we will actually start making some sounds. And feedback here, so some synthesizers, like the DX7, for example, only offer a set feedback path per algorithm. We're actually not going to deal with the algorithms too much today unless we give some extra time at the end. I'll go into those a little bit because right now, again, we're just dealing with a 2 oscillator stack. And if you're using something like Synclavier, it's all two operator pairs. Like there's no algorithms built into it, so that's all you would ever deal with on that. Obviously now you'd probably, rather than using an actual synclavier, you'd be using the Arturia one, which is an excellent FM synth, by the way. That has some neat tricks that it can do that you don't see in most FM synths. But in any case, what you'd be dealing with here is the more this is open would be the equivalent of the more the filter is open. So lots of overtones, complex timbre here, simple sine wave here, and all points in between. And then the last thing is feedback. Here you have both, on this MISC random tab, you have algorithm feedback, and that's the feedback path shown here. So in this case, that's the same as, it's just oscillator 2 feeds back. That's what this little line is here, is a feedback path, right? So you can get more complex feedback paths, like this one takes the basically the output and feeds it all the way back to the beginning, versus this one just feeds back the output of this single operator back into itself. That's much more common, but there are some that do this. And then a lot of synths these days offer per operator feedback, as this does, and that's found right here. This also has other settings. We're just going to ignore those for now. Again, keep it simple. If there's something that you see that I'm not talking about, it's because it's not necessary for what we are talking about today. Maybe at the end we can go into it if you have questions about some of this other stuff. Okay, so that is the levels, the feedback, the ratios, and then the operator itself. That's the basis for all this stuff. And now we're going to start making some sounds. And I am going to use this exercise list. If you want to follow along with the lesson plan, you can go to the etherdiver.com and the How to Synth tab, and then FM Basics 1, and go to the exercises. So the first exercise just says to orient yourself on whatever synth you're using, and we've kind of already done that, but let's go ahead and just be very explicit. These are your operators here across the top. It's 6 operator synth, right? We're just going to deal with 1 and 2 today, 1 and 2. Here's where our ratio controls are. Here's our level controls, feedback controls, and our envelopes, okay? That's everything we're going to deal with today. Oh, and then there's also this algorithm feedback down on this tab. There's obviously a ton more controls, a ton more options here, but you're going to see that just these handful of options allow us to do a lot, quite a bit, okay? So that's the orientation stage. Wasn't that easy? My wife is texting me. Hold on, let me make sure we're not having some sort of emergency here. No, we're not. She's just sending me some information. Okay, so let's go ahead and do exercise 2. We're going to set carrier to full volume. That's already done. Organ style envelope. So we're just going to set this envelope to no decay, full sustain, attack, and just a tiny little bit of release here. Basically, 100 milliseconds is basically nothing. Right? Okay. And now we're going to we're going to hold a note open, and we're going to slowly open the, or raise the level of the modulator and see how that affects the sound. You can see, if you look over here on this, this little window right here, this is showing the harmonic, so this is the fundamental, and this is a second harmonic coming in, right? And here you can see the harmonic is actually getting quieter, and it dips out for a second and then comes back in. Additional harmonics, the fundamental's dipping out a little bit again. So you have these weird spots where the fundamental kind of gets lost. All the way up to full modulation. And that's kind of a noisy sound. And this is I call this a saw-like wave. So a 1-to-1 ratio gives you a saw-like wave. Not quite a saw, but it's in that neighborhood. All right. To actually get a saw, you have to implement feedback, and we will do that as one of the lessons here. Okay, and then the last part of this exercise, it says to leave this envelope the same and have this envelope slowly rise and fall. So yeah, we'll give it, say, that's too many. We'll give it 4 seconds or so to rise, and then 4 to fall. So you can kind of hear this. We'll set the level midpoint, say 51%. And so here we go. This is our first sound. It's a basic sweep sound, a FM sweep. So it's like a filter sweep, but in FM. And you can see that this kind of goes through like a, if you look at the wave shape on the carrier over here, you can actually see it go through a pretty, like it's right there. It's pretty close to a soft saw wave, right? And then it kind of gets folded a little bit. They're saw-like harmonics. It's a similar harmonic set as saw. All right. Okay. That's our first, second actually. And we're going to go back to, so exercise 3, go back to the organ envelopes. These are basically, by the way, going through each of these sort of introduces another piece of the things we've already talked about. Excuse me. Oh, that reminds me. Let me open my Red Bull here. Sorry about the sound. Ah, there we go. Got to keep that energy level from flagging. Okay, let's go back to the pitch here. We got our envelope set. So that was all 1 to 1. Now we'll set it 2 to 1. Do the same thing, same note. And here, with a 2 to 1 ratio, we get a much, it's something closer to a square wave. And you also get a triangle along the way here too. And once again, you can kind of see these harmonics over here shift. Sometimes the fundamental dips out. Now, I'm not smart enough with the theory to explain why that happens, but it's just something you need to be aware of, that at certain modulation points, you'll lose some of your fundamental. If you want that as an effect, that's cool. You can seek it out. Like here, we've kind of lost the fundamental. We're just hearing the overtones, the harmonics, right? And if that's an effect you're looking for, great. And if it's not, then you just move it up or down a little bit and it's self-correcting. I'm assuming it's some kind of phase cancellation having to do with the amplitudes lining up in a weird way, but I don't really know. I don't know the theory. I just know it happens. But yeah, so again, it gets louder. The louder the modulator, the more complex the resulting waveform, right? Pretty simple stuff. All right, now we'll try it with a ratio of 3. And this is frequently described as a more a guitar-like hollow tone is a way I've seen it described, but you'll recognize the sound. You've heard it before. All right, okay, and then 4. So this is 2 octaves. This is also going to do a very square-like waveform, a square triangle-like waveform, but with missing harmonics. The harmonics don't start till a little higher in the series. Okay, right, and then try 5. And as we get into these higher harmonics, it kind of starts around 5. You start to hear some of the so-called glassy digital kind of timbres that FM is famous for. Now it also, so now we're going to try some higher, keep going up in the series. We're going to jump around. We're no longer going to go, point by point. So we'll jump to 7. Again, see over here, really just getting those, we're skipping all these high harmonics in between and just getting the high harmonics. Get a few extra harmonics at certain points there. But again, it's just this big gap here. Boop, boop, boop. In between, right? Okay, so let's go to 10. And the numbers I'm picking are relatively arbitrary. I'm just trying to show you that there's a profound effect basically on the waveform you get based on the ratio. And maybe we can show that another way here in a second. But yeah, so 10, once again, very glassy, and then we'll go all the way up, say, to 17. This goes all the way to 32. Different scents, again, have different ranges. 32 would be, let's see, 2 is 1 octave, 4 is 2 octaves, 8 is 3 octaves, 16 is 4 octaves, so that's 5 octaves above the fundamental at 32. And 17 is obviously some weird ratio. So, and this is really getting into those kind of glassy, metallic, bell-like tones, right? Ringing tones. Very digital sounding now. This is now we're well into the tones that you cannot create with analog synthesis, right? Okay, and then the last thing to do is to set it to some weird non-integer settings. We'll use the fine here and show you what some of these sound like. So these tend to be a little unstable, metallic. See there, you get some of that metallic tone. And if you once you're experienced with these, you'll kind of realize that, like, it's not all like the 3, 2, 1. I wonder if we can get. Let's see. We'll do this at 1 point. There we go. Look at that. We have pi as a ratio. And with these non-integer ratios, as you get higher and higher levels of modulation, it really can get pretty noisy, metallic, ringy, unpleasant. But also pretty interesting tones there. And then the last thing you can do, of course, is to set it to a fixed number. So we'll just set it to like 2340 hertz. Why not, right? And so again, you have a pretty different effect here. Your fundamental comes through, but the harmonics kind of tend to stay the same because it's a fixed pitch modulating them, right? And with the fixed pitch, like some of your pitches might actually sound relatively musical. If, like, for example, if you set it this fixed pitch to 440, right, and you play an A, it's going to sound pretty musical, right? But this C is going to sound a little less musical, even though it's see, the A sounds pretty good. B sounds kind of rough. C sounds kind of rough. D, E, F, G. Hey, look, the A sounds good. Because it's simple. It's a simple ratio with itself, so it sounds musical. But with the other keys, it sounds rough because it's not a simple ratio. And you can choose a weird ratio. Like, there you go. That's not going to be musical with anything, right? And that's frequently used for sound effects and percussion sounds. That's what you use the weird fixed ratios for. Okay, then now we've gotten through ratios and tunings, fixed tunings. Now the last thing to introduce is feedback. We're going to go back to this 1-to-1 ratio, right? And actually, I'm going to show you interesting thing about feedback in FM synthesis is you can create a saw wave with just feedback. And since this is set up to, I happen to know what the setting is, this has the self-oscillating oscillator, so I'll show you that just operator 1 with level of 0 over here on operator 2 is going to make us a yeah, fixed is good if you want to do any kind of non-standard tunings. If you're looking for like an exotic sound for, to make some weird synth sounds or simulating non-Western instruments, things like that, fixed can be good for that too. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, as you see here, you can see the wave shape, and you can see this nice distribution of harmonics. We have it's a very digital sounding saw, but that's a saw wave. And it's just the operator 1 feeding back into itself at 67%. Gives us a saw wave. And as you turn the feedback down, you can see the saw wave kind of softens a little bit. You get kind of a pleasant, partial, like a filtered saw sound there. And then at 67 or so, you basically have a saw, and if you keep going, it gets all messed up. You basically have noise at 100% feedback. Now, if you are in a system that only has algorithmic feedback, like one feedback path per algorithm, like the original DX7, you have a little less flexibility, but it's fine. So the interesting thing about feedback is if it's feeding back a single oscillator, you're always going to end up with this wave shape that goes into saw and then up to noise if the feedback level gets high enough. And if you have a more complex feedback path, then you can get more complex sounds. But with just a single operator feeding back into itself, you get a saw wave, which is a pretty powerful modulator, as it turns out. So let's go ahead and create a saw wave with the algorithmic feedback, and we do that by setting this at about 55, if I recall correctly. And we get this at basically 100. And so it's not quite as clean of a saw wave. You can get like a soft saw here, and then a harder saw here. It's again not as clean of a saw wave, but all right. And then if we put that to 2, and now we've got a pretty convincing square wave. There we go. There's our square wave. And you can start sort of, as the level goes up, it gets kind of an edge. Some bonus harmonics come in, and then quickly turns into noise above like 70%. So I hope that is clear. We'll try some other ratios here, but the point here is that feedback is sort of your last tool in terms of this 2-operator sound design. to kind of give you a little edge in see here the feedback's giving you this sort of like, if you take the feedback, oh, actually I guess we don't have any feedback on here. Turn the feedback up, it gets even messier. It gets this kind of like, you've already got kind of a aggressive sounding, you know, FM industrial kind of sound, and the feedback adds even almost a sync-like tone or something to it. But okay, so that's all the basic operations right there. And now it's time to actually make some sounds, which is good because I've kind of actually ran a little long here. The final exercise is it's time to make some simple patches. So if you did the subtractive lessons, this is basically the same. This is how I like to end these. It's just like I've showed you all the tools. Now it's time to make some basic sounds. And I would just encourage you, in these exercises, I always just say, pick some sounds that you'll use. Like everyone's sort of style of music is going to be a little different. I did prepare some sounds here, but let's go ahead and just make a square wave bass here, all right? So we'll transpose this down an octave, give it 2-to-1 ratio. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. Alright, so that's a pretty decent tone. And we'll use our envelopes here to do almost like a little swept bass. So as you probably can already figure out, this is like the key to your dubstep growls is right here with these sort of sweeping. There you go. So you gotta already have like a little slow two-op bass. We'll call this two-op slow bass. All right. Maybe we can make a lead sound. We'll go back to 1-to-1 on this. Turn the transposition off. Don't need that. Make our envelope. We don't need this slowness anymore, and we don't want it to decay like that. And it's a lead, so. Again, this is like right? So just a little and we'll make a quick sweep. I love sweeps. They're like one of my favorite things in the world. And obviously, I'm just, barely scratching the surface here, but the whole point of this here is to show you that, like, without even, like, venturing outside of two operators, and even we're ignoring whole panels. We're full of controls, much less the other features of this. But just with a 2-operator FM stack, you can produce quite a lot of sounds. Yeah, and so just to rather than walk you through all these, I will just let's look at the. Oh, I see. The way these are organized in here is kind of silly too. Okay, I see. Shouldn't they be? Yeah, there they all are. Okay, so these are some sounds. So there's another kind of FM growl synth. These are some ones that I just made last night as part of this, like, to prepare for this lesson plan. Yeah, 2-to-1 ratio. It's tuned down. The envelopes. And it looks like here I actually used the feedback, not in the path, signal path, but built into the oscillator. You can get a little more feedback, like the feedback's tuned a little higher on the per oscillator one on here. I don't know why it's set up that way. It's just, I think it's because this algorithm feedback is meant to mirror what the DX7 does, so you can use DX7 patches. And versus this, that's something the DX7 can't do, so there's no point. So FM is really good for bells, so I made this little bell patch. And that's just a 2-op bell. As you can see here, this is a good example of, this is what we use non-whole number ratios, non-simple ratios for. Get the nice bell tones. Here's a little kind of brass lead. Right? This is that bass we just made. Not quite as intense as that other one. And here's just kind of a pleasant FM-y sound. This is like a... You can use it as a key sound or pad. There's like almost a mysterious sound to it. Little, almost bell-like. Yeah. And then there's the sweep. This is that other sweep. Okay, so, and those are all, every single one of those, 2 operators, right? And we have 6 total. Yeah, the brass is very ad-lib. Hey, Raudvik, how's it going? Raudvik? I know I'm not saying it right. I've definitely softened it in my mind over time. Okay, so we have actually reached the end of the prepared lesson, but that's good because it gives us more time. I'd like to answer any questions y'all have. I was kind of trying to keep an eye on the thing. I didn't see any big questions that anyone had. Some discussion of OPL chips, just, home keyboards, things like that. A lot of Yamaha's early home keyboards are 2-operator FM synths, and some of the cool ones in the 400 series, 460, 470, and the 500 series, and a few others as well. Like the PSS 460, PSS 470, PSS 560, PSS 570, PSS 480, I think, have these little 2-op FM with a programmer built in, so you can kind of produce some of these kind of tones on the toy keyboards. But I do think it's worthwhile to learn to the key to mastering FM synthesis is understanding what's going on, not on a technical level. Like, it doesn't really matter if you understand the mathematics of it or why it works, but understanding it on a, when I do this, this is the result. And if you look at things on a 2-operator level, they're only a tiny bit more complex than subtractive synthesis. You basically, each ratio gives you a different continuously variable waveform from zero modulation to full modulation. The feedback adds an extra wrinkle, essentially gives you access to another set of waveforms. And then all that you gain by adding additional operators, there's two things. Okay, so the simplest thing is, and what I encourage you, this is lesson 2, a little sneak preview of what's going to be in lesson 2, is when you're getting started, stick with these algorithms right here. 5 and 6 on the DX7 and on the opsix. And if you're working in 4-operator land, just the same thing, but with 2 stacks of 2 instead of 3 stacks of 2. Because what you're looking at here is, again, to relate it to the subtractive synth world, is a 3-oscillator synth, right? With each oscillator has its own filter, essentially. Because it's a continuously variable wave shape, right? It's like having a dedicated filter for each oscillator. And you already know what to do with a 3-oscillator synth, right? You understand that you can layer a saw wave with a triangle wave to get a slightly different tone, or that you can, if when you have individual envelope controls, that you can have a noisy burst of one oscillator for the attack, and then a slightly slower attack for the other 2 oscillators. You can detune oscillators from each other to get that fatness, etc., etc. So now you take this knowledge that any 2 operators gives you a continuously variable wave shape, a set of them based on what ratio and feedback settings you've selected. And then now you can layer them this way, up to 3 at a time if you've got a 6 operator, and just 2 at a time if you've got a 4 operator, which is plenty. A 4-operator FM synth is plenty, in all honesty. Like the Digitone, the Reface DX, I think maybe the Volca FM, although the Volca FM works with DX7 sounds, so, but I do think a lot of them are maybe just cut down. But anyway, it doesn't matter. 4 operators is plenty. Even 2 is reasonable. You can do a lot of work with 2 oscillators. How do you make anything with user algorithm? Okay, so that is definitely different modes. So this is a very opsix specific question. The user algorithms are here on the opsix, and you just I have not messed around with these too much, but you can create different modulation paths and whatnot, and in this little box right here. That is actually one of the things on the opsix that I have not messed with. It is incredibly deep that way. And then when you say, how do you access other modes, I have definitely messed around. If that's what you're talking about, is like this stuff, the ring mod, filter, filter FM, wave folder, effect, bypass, mute. Bypass and mute or nothing, but yeah. I have definitely messed around with those extensively. And I will do a... so I'm trying to keep this one as generic as possible, right? Because it's just the intro to FM. I will definitely do an opsix specific one where I go into more of these modes, because these add... So just with the 6-operator FM synth, you have an incredible amount of depth. But in addition to that, you have all these modes, right? So you got FM, ring mod, which is amplitude modulation, through 0 amplitude modulation specifically. Filter mode, which just puts a filter... gives you a filter in that stage. And then filter FM, which lets you modulate the filter at audio speed, a wave folder, which is a wave folder, and effect, which lets you pick some cool effects at an oscillator level. So you can distort your oscillators or put a slight delay on them, a flange your chorus, whatever, as well as some wild wave shapers and stuff like that. And that adds just an unreal amount of depth to this synth. That is definitely it's almost a whole other synthesizer built in. But you also have, but wait, there's more, a filter. So it's got a bunch of different filter models, low pass 12 and 24, a modeled MS-20 filter, a modeled Poly 6 filter, high pass 12 and 24, modeled high pass MS-20 filter, band pass 6 and 12, band reject 6 and 12, right? So all these different envelopes, and then you also have all these extra filters. Then you also have 3 additional envelopes. So each operator has its own dedicated amplitude envelope, but then you have 3 assignable envelopes. They are sort of nominally assigned to, the first one is assigned to pitch as a pitch envelope, but you don't have to use it that way. You can use it any way you want. And then there's a mod matrix over here that you can use to, for example, say put envelope 1 to select the algorithm. And so when you, it's like cycling through the algorithms there. Very silly stuff. So it's got this powerful mod matrix as well, plus built-in effects. The effects are very good. So the Volca is 6-up. Okay. I've seen some crazy stuff done with the user algorithms. And I will definitely get there at some point. This synth is so deep. It's one of a handful, maybe the only synth I can think of that, comparing hardware to hardware, because I do have this in hardware as well, that maybe gives my Microfreak a run for the money in terms of potentially being my favorite synth. In software, Pigments definitely gives it a run for the money as well, and this as well. But yeah, this is just an incredible synth, and even if you never step beyond the FM, it's an incredible synth. Because it's just it's like a DX7 with a bunch of added features to it. It also has this width feature, which lets you essentially change the width of your sine waves. Here, I'll do it on one that's actually not sounding, but you can just see it essentially makes, let me turn this down. Makes it real skinny, right? So it's like pulse width for sine waves. Oh, it's still doing that weird. I gotta turn this off. Off. Okay. And you can modulate that as well. You could put an LFO on that, for example, to get like a pulse width sines. So yeah, this is just a wild synthesizer. Can do a crazy amount of stuff beyond your basic FM. But yeah, if you are getting started with FM, again, my advice is stick to 2 operators till you kind of understand what's going on with them, and then stick with these type of algorithms until you really understand the possibilities. These will allow you to build an insane amount of patches, and then when you're ready to graduate to these more complex algorithms, that'll be covered in FM Basics 2. I'll cover the algorithm selection, why you might want to use one algorithm versus another, different types of algorithms, etc. But if I could leave you with one thought, it's when it comes to algorithms, the further away from being heard, so the further away from the carrier you are, the more subtle the influence is going to be. So you'll notice that amongst these 32, the first 32 algorithms are the ones that the DX7 had. They're identical. And you'll notice that the most you ever get in a single stack is 4 operators. And that's in part because, you rarely need more than that. Like the 4 operators together in a single stack allows you to do some pretty subtle and wild things. And yeah, the point is this operator here is not going to have nearly as profound an effect on the sound as this operator here. And it's also worth noting that if you turn this operator all the way down, this one isn't going to do shit because it won't be able to modulate through, these are in a line, right? This is all in series. There are ones that are parallel, like here, oscillator. These are all going to affect this the same amount. And it doesn't matter if 4 is sounding, 6 is still going to be sounding, right? Because it just goes in like this. But yeah, that's basically it. Yeah, feedback patching. Okay, well, I don't see any other questions, so, and it's 1:30, and I do like to try and keep these to an hour. I think it makes them more viewable, watchable as VODs. I will be probably taking polling in Mastodon and Blue Sky to see what we're doing next week. We could continue on down this path and get a little deeper into FM. We could dive into the opsix. We could go back to sampling. Or we could do something specific like, trying to figure out percussion, programming, and a couple of different synths, or maybe we could look at MIDI Freak or something. But yep, that's pretty much it. I hope that this was useful to all of y'all, and that you found something that helped you in your synth programming endeavors. FM makes a little more sense to you, I guess, is really what I hope. It's really not that complex. It's just a matter of keeping a few things in mind and kind of processing how they affect the sounds and whatnot. Yeah, I will actually, Radvik. We should talk offline about that. It would be nice to have a little inside knowledge before I dive into that, for sure. Someone who's dealt with it a little bit before. So yeah, let's talk offline about that. And thank you everyone for coming by. I really appreciate it. If you missed any of this or you need to go over it again, it is available as VOD. If you have specific questions beyond the scope of this, or if you are looking to have private lessons, I do lessons. I'm totally available. I have lots of bookings available. We can do it over Zoom or Teams or whatever. If you happen to live in Sacramento or can travel to Sacramento, you can come to my house and I'll show you how to do it. You can sit right next to me. And I'll walk you through everything that way. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming. You can find me on Mastodon as EtherDiver at EtherDiver at ravenation.club. You can find me on Blue Sky at EtherDiver at bluesky.app. You can find me at etherdiver.com always. You can find this FM lesson, FM Basics 1, is available now at etherdiver.com. This will be available as a VOD. I'll actually probably stick this in the bottom of that lesson as well for people that want to have a little walkthrough. And yep, that's it. See you all.